Welcome to the Sound of Ideas from IdeaStream Public Media. I'm Drew Mazius, in today for Stephanie Haney. Thanks so much for joining us. A new Ohio law took effect in March, aiming to deal with, quote, dangerous and vicious dogs. It was created in the aftermath of a brutal attack on a girl who was 11 years old at the time. Her name is Avery Russell, and so the law is being called Avery's Law. Avery was on a play date with a friend and that friend's mother in June of 2024 when they all visited the home of Stephanie Ayers, a relative of the friend of her mom. When Avery went inside the house to use the bathroom, she was attacked by two pit bulls that she didn't know were inside. Stephanie, the dog owner, was not home at the time, and the friend's mother tried to step in only to be attacked herself. The attack only stopped when a nearby house washer heard screams and sprayed the dogs with water. Avery was so badly injured that she was put into an induced coma for 1 week and spent several more weeks in the hospital, coming out on the other side with disfigurement of her face. The dog owner, Stephanie, was convicted of failing to confine her dogs, sentenced to 4 days in jail, and required to pay a $450 fine. One of the dogs has already been euthanized after a police officer had to shoot it at the scene to further break up the attack. The other dog was removed from the home. In response to this, the Ohio legislature passed Avery's Law unanimously, codifying new requirements related to dogs that attack people and other animals. The law also impacts dog wardens, humane officers, and animal rescue groups. We'll spend most of the hour today discussing Avery's Law. And joining us for the conversation today, we have in studio Ken Clark. He's the executive director of Rescue Village Animal Shelter and a Geauga County humane officer. Thanks so much for being here, Ken.
Thanks for having me.
Calling in today, we have Jen Book, the president of Cause for Canines Rescue Group that's based out of Columbus. Welcome to the show, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Larry Williams, who is the chief dog warden in Licking County and Southwest director of the Ohio County Dog Wardens Association, also joins us. Larry, welcome to you.
Thank you very much for having me.
And if you have a question for our panel or you'd like to share an experience, you can give us a call at 866-578-0903 or send an email, soi@ideastream.org. You can also message us on Instagram at The Sound of Ideas. I'm sure we have a lot of dog owners in the audience. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Again, that number is 866-578-0903 or soi@ideastream.org. Larry, I want to start with you and some background on who's impacted by this new law. Tell us about the Licking County Dog Warden's Office, how big your staff is, what services your officers provide, and what the role of a dog warden is in general.
So Licking County, we have about approximately 180,000 people for population. If I'm fully staffed, we have 3 officers. We have an assistant chief, and we have myself as the chief. Our role as dog wardens is we enforce Chapter 955 of the Ohio Revised Code. That involves dogs running loose, dog licensing, dog bite investigations, anything to do with the dog as far as that. We here do not do cruelty or neglect. That would be the humane agent here in Licking County.
Great. Thanks for that explainer, Larry. And Ken, you have a dual role. You're a Geauga County humane officer, which Larry just mentioned. And tell us what that work kind of entails.
Well, the Humane Society is about 30 people who work we have about a 20,000 square foot facility over on the east side of Cleveland. That's cats, dogs, domesticated barn animals, and hospital for homeless animals. And then there's the law enforcement side the agency has. That's 3 humane officers for Geauga County. And we enforce 959 of the Ohio Revised Code under 1717. That's where our statutory powers come from.
And what's the intersection look like of you and the dog warden's office? How do you kind of interact with each other?
We have different sets of the law that we enforce as humane officers and dog wardens. Obviously, there's a crossover because they're animals, but the law that went into effect on March 20th clarified a lot of things and made dog wardens essentially a mandatory reporter of abuse and neglect, either to appropriate law enforcement or humane officers.
Interesting. So you're also the executive director of Rescue Village Animal Shelter. That's a private nonprofit animal shelter. Tell us about the shelter, the size of the staff, and the volume of animals that just come through Rescue Village.
Rescue Village sees about 3,000 animals that it helps every year. 60% of the animals that come from owner surrenders. So those are people getting divorced, people dying, people with allergies, people moving, needing to get into an apartment that the new landlord doesn't allow them to have. So that's about 60% of our population. And then we do active transports with transport partners locally, and then regionally we work with Mahoning, Trumbull, and surrounding counties, not to mention a host of rescues around Northeast Ohio and beyond, and then also the ASPCA on a national level.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you interact with a lot of other folks in the Northeast Ohio area, other humane societies in adjoining counties?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you help them with staffing if there's maybe not as many staff in some of those other counties?
Well, humane societies tend to operate in their counties as the center of legal and, for better purposes, a organizing agency around animal rescue in general. But they're also, everybody's very independent as well, from county to county, rescue to rescue. So we all try to help each other out, but we all have our own issues as well.
Yeah. And Jen, rounding out some of the background of our guests that are joining us today, Cause for Canines is an all-volunteer rescue service. Tell us about the size of your operation and the community that you serve.
So we have about 40 active volunteers. We are based in Central Ohio, but we have fosters throughout Ohio. We have some in Cleveland. We don't just focus our fostering in Columbus, but that is our main area. And we have volunteers ranging from fostering, doing transports, running events, processing applications, completing home visits. They do a range of duties. And since we are foster-based, all the dogs go directly into a home for decompression, vetting, and training if needed. We pull from a variety of shelters as well as owner surrenders, and we also have a program that pulls in puppy mill survivors. We even have a program with St. Croix as they are overwhelmed with dogs and they don't have a great chance to be adopted there. So we have a program set with one of their shelters where they actually fly dogs from St. Croix to Columbus with a flyer, and we adopt puppies from them so they actually have a chance. So, but my main focus is in rural Kentucky shelters, as they have so little help, far less resources than many of the Ohio shelters. So we have a variety of areas that we pull in dogs from.
Yeah, and the resources question makes me want to go back to Larry and just ask a little bit of a follow-up. In terms of staffing down where you're located, Larry, do you help out other conjoining counties, other departments that might need your assistance with animal issues?
Yeah, we have helped in the past, and going forward, we would help as well. Yeah, if somebody needs help, they just give us a call. As long as I have the staffing available, yeah, we'll definitely do what we can to help other counties and other agencies.
Yeah. And Larry, you provided written testimony in support of Avery's Law before the Ohio House Public Service Committee back in June of 2024, where you cited examples of injuries people sustained from dogs. Can you tell us about some of what you've seen and why you thought it was important to pass this legislation?
I mean, personally for us here in this county, we've seen more and more, and talking to other dog wardens in Ohio, we've seen more and more injuries and serious injuries going on within Ohio. And for most of us, it was just we weren't being able to have enough in our toolbox to do anything about it. So we were just able to charge them. Sometimes it was unclassified misdemeanors, so they wouldn't even get in front of a judge. So they get to keep the dog and potentially happen again.
And what do you attribute that to? I don't know if that's something you can speak to, but is it just more dogs out there? Owners not being fully prepared to take care of an animal? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know what the statistics are, but personally, I believe that there are more dogs out there than what it was when I first started in this profession. But yeah, I mean, I think it boils down to education and of dog owners, harbors, and keepers of what it takes to, have a dog. It is a huge responsibility. It is a liability at times. They're still an animal. We all think of them as our family and our pets, but ultimately they are an animal, and it is a huge responsibility and can be a liability as well.
Ken, I saw you nodding your head there. You want to follow that up?
Well, they're absolutely family members, but they are also something you have to be prepared to take care of. Mm-hmm. They require care, they require attention, and neglect can happen on a lot of different levels for an animal. Being you don't train it, you don't keep it, you don't keep your neighbors safe,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. If you're just joining us on The Sound of Ideas, we're talking about Avery's Law, a new law that is strengthening penalties and restrictions on dog attacks. We are talking with Ken Clark from the Rescue Village Animal Shelter, Jen Book, president of Cause for Canines, Larry Williams from the Licking County and Southwest Director of the Ohio County Dog Wardens Association. If you want to give us a call, 866-578-0903. Again, that phone number is 866-578-0903. You can also send us an email, soi@ideastream.org. Ken, sticking with you, the term dangerous and vicious dog is used in Avery's Law. Can you explain at all what that means and how those involved in a case kind of come to that conclusion?
Well, that's a designation that would belong to the dog wardens. So dog warden can designate a dog as dangerous, vicious, or nuisance. The thing that's interesting about the law is that for an animal shelter like Rescue Village, it changes the way that we work with any animal that could potentially be designated that and or has any kind of bite history. Anything above a tooth graze, and that's like if you're playing with your dog and they kind of scrape your hand a little bit, that would be a tooth graze. Anything beyond that really gets into some pretty serious liability for owners on animals, and then also serious liability for animal shelters. Because if a staff member or a citizen hides an animal's history, they could become liable for that animal's behavior even after they don't own it. So the dog's history travels with the dog, as opposed to kind of before there was people kind of hiding animals that maybe had hurt somebody and then they move them on and that history doesn't go along. That's the good part of the law. It doesn't let that
hiding kind
the
of take place?
hiding. Yeah,
Okay.
I've seen it, and other people in animal welfare have seen it. A dog bites somebody really seriously, and then somebody spirits that animal away, and it kind of launders that animal, but that animal's behavior is still the same.
Yeah, maybe it hasn't been addressed properly. Yeah. We got an email from Steven. He said, no domestic dog is inherently vicious. I don't understand why the dog can get punished with death. A dog deemed unreformable should at least be sent to some sort of sanctuary, and the person responsible should cover any costs involved. To be clear, I completely understand if someone feels like they need to kill a dog to stop an attack in progress. Thanks for sending that email, Stephen, soi@ideastream.org, if you want to weigh in. Larry, I'm curious if you can weigh in on that dangerous and vicious designation and kind of how that label is, how that conclusion is made.
Sure. So the definition in the law is a dangerous dog. Now, the thing to remember is these are all unprovoked. So if the dog was teased, tormented, tortured, coming to the aid of defense of its owner, keeper, harbor, we're not designating those dogs, but it's an unprovoked injury. Dangerous dog is an injury to a person other than serious injury. Also, a dog that kills another dog. Also can be attacking livestock, injuring, killing livestock. A nuisance dog is off of the property of the owner, keeper, harbor, and it has to be coming at you in a menacing fashion, apparent attitude of attack. Vicious would be serious injury or fatality. And again, all those are unprovoked. And as far as the email goes, dog wardens do not, we don't like to euthanize dogs, but we also have a job to do, and our job is to try to keep the public as safe as possible. These are unprovoked attacks, bites, injuries. The owners are responsible for their pets, and that, yes, they should be responsible for all that, but that is a civil matter. And we have no authority in that.
Yeah.
All we can do is designate the dog and charge them criminally.
Thanks for that, Larry. Jen, I want to go to you and ask you if you think that the unprovoked qualifier is sufficient in Avery's Law, and kind of respond to that unprovoked qualifier.
So really quick about the email. I also, my question lies with that. What sanctuaries are there to send these dogs? It's not like there's an unlimited amount of places that will take dogs that have had vicious dog bites. It is on the responsibility of the owner, but passing the problem on to someone else isn't really a reality in general. But in regard to the unprovoked qualifier, I feel like there's good and there's also not great. I do think it's good that the law does protect animals that are acting in self-defense or property protection. I also like that the qualifier allows the court to avoid punishing a dog that might have been behaving in an age-appropriate, playful way. Um, I feel like it also does prioritize animal welfare. It does help prevent the mandatory death penalty for an animal that was acting out of fear, pain, or legitimate self-preservation in that type of instance. But the gray area that I see is the burden of proof. It's really hard to prove exactly what happened right before an attack if there were no witnesses, no camera footage. And without that, the gray area does lie on, was the victim provoking the dog? So in those circumstances, the dog is going to be getting the end result likely of death. And if the dog is vicious, I absolutely understand, but I've seen plenty of dogs come in to the rescue that have histories of, severe abuse, and you just don't know how that human was treating the dog in the circumstance, which is where I think the gray area should be. Maybe there should be some more criteria there, but I don't know how they would do that.
I want to get back to that unprovoked classification in just a second, but let's go to the phone lines. We have Brennan calling in from Pepper Pike. Welcome to the Sound of Ideas. What's your thought today, Brennan?
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I wanted to share an experience I had at the South Chagrin Metro Parks not long ago, walking my dog, who I had on a leash, and we were approached by a very large dog without a leash. And thankfully, all the dogs were kind of nice. But when I had asked the owner, I was like, hey, man, why isn't your dog on a leash? You don't know that mine is friendly. Something bad could have happened. They completely threw it back at me, gaslighted me. I'm part of the problem. The dog is nice. Stop being like that. And something easily could have gone wrong if my dog wasn't nice. So I wanted to share this story for all those that are listening. No matter how cool and kind and pretty your dog is, please put them on a leash, because you never know how timid or scared or nice the other dog might be. So wanted to share that because I think a lot of people feel emboldened to not leash their dogs and think they can do anything, and it just shouldn't be like that. So please leash your dog to avoid any mistakes that might happen, because they're dogs. You never know. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in, Brennan. Ken, your response to that?
Well, I mean, leash laws are a leash law on purpose. So I would say follow the law if you're a dog owner and you're not going to have the problem that caller had.
Yeah. And Jen, do you want to, I know you're passionate about off-leash dogs as well.
Oh my gosh, yes. I agree with what the caller said. I also feel that Avery's Law could have been more punitive with the off-leash dog the charges. I know that it's a misdemeanor, but it should be a felony. Make it an F5, make it an F4, make it something that people will maybe think twice about. Felonies do hold more weight than misdemeanors. I do know a lot of dog owners think their dogs are perfect angels, but they are animals. They are animals that are driven by instinct. They don't think of consequence. And if a dog has any type of trigger, even if you don't know about it, that dog will act without thinking about the consequence of their action. And then the dog is put in a bad position. So I do think that everyone should leash their dogs, no matter how great of an owner you think you are, no matter how great you think you've trained your dog. It's not a responsible way to bring your dog into the public without having some sort of guardrails.
Larry, I want to go back to you and return to this unprovoked term that we've been using for dogs. And as someone that is involved in enforcing animal authority and laws, how do you come to that conclusion? Is that something that you've encountered already, where you maybe don't have all the facts, where maybe there wasn't someone there, or what's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, we've run into several scenarios like that. It's just a matter of asking questions and trying to get in touch with everybody that was involved, whether it's the owner, harbor keeper, the victim, any witnesses. We'll search for ring cameras if it happened outside of a house. Anything we can get, voluntary statements that we submit with all of our cases. anything that we can get, we're going to try to get it as long as we can legally get it. But yeah, it's just a matter of talking and getting all sides of the story. And there are times that, yes, we have cases that, we're putting it all together. And when we're done with our investigation, we're still not sure. We take those to the prosecutor's office and let them determine, give us our legal counsel on it, and we go with what they say. They are our legal counsel, so we're going to follow what they tell us to do.
Yeah. Let's go back to the phones. 866-578-0903. Again, that phone number, 866-578-0903 to call in. Jim is calling in from Stark County. Good morning, Jim. What's your thought today?
Well, good morning. I'd like to approach this from several directions. I hope you'll give me 2 or 3 minutes. I was a victim and my dog of a number of attacks here in Stark County within a municipality, by the way, and I won't say if it was Akron, Canton, or Alliance or whatever, but so within a municipality where you'd like to think that there's more animal control. But I submitted one time a letter to our mayor. I'd had 11 attacks. I had 2 dogs that I walked in the morning and in the afternoon, always on leashes. And in 2018, I was walking a dog, and there was apparently a dog that was being harbored, an animal that was loose, and it was being harbored behind a house. And the dog looked tame until my little dog, Lulu, a little beagle dog, and I got on that street walking. And the dog came over and sniffed a little bit, and no one ever knows what's going to trigger these dogs. I don't know how you provoke or don't provoke a dog, but no one knows. I'll associate myself with Jen's remarks about not knowing about triggers. But my dog was killed in the attack. I suffered a $30,000 complete avulsion of a hamstring fighting the dog in the street. And I don't know what would happen if a couple of guys hadn't come by on bicycles. The dog was afraid of the bicycles. People don't know what dogs are like when you fight them. There are way too many pits and pit mixes out there, and I know people that love their pit bulls, but somehow those dogs have multiplied. I had an officer tell me that what you need to do when you walk your dog is carry a stick because dogs can't handle sticks. And I worked on the animal control problem down here. We went for several years when we lost the animal control officer, and then it was county responsibility for a dog warden, and then they got rid of the dog wardens and moved it to the sheriff's department. So, as I said, I can approach this from a number of angles, but, I've been a victim of it. I know what dogs do when they're in the dog that killed my dog was an Australian cattle dog, they called it, and those dogs can be pretty vicious as well. So it is a big problem, of course, and I think I'm not exactly sure. I know the state has tried to take some more measures recently, and there was I was one of the people who was featured in newspapers around the state about 2 years ago or something when they did a lot of cover stories on dog attacks. So it is a big problem. Yes, put your dog on a leash, but I see people right now, and I'll end with this. I see people right now walking down the street, 12-year-old girls trying to hold a pit bull, and the pit's not even being triggered by another dog or scent or anything else, and they can barely hold on to that dog. And even most people don't know the strength of a 60-pound dog. They have no idea of the strength of that dog when it is triggered or when it just decides to do something. So thank you for giving me the time.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for calling in. Ken, I want to go back to you for before we get to pit bulls, which we've got a lot of emails in, which we'll get to in just a second. But he talked about that $30,000 medical bill, and I want to ask you about liability a little bit. And how has civil liability changed for animal attacks following Avery's law taking effect? Were owners not liable for injuries before this?
Ohio's liability laws did not change with Avery's law. You heard the warden say that it basically created a clear line so that accountability could happen easier and those dogs couldn't be hidden away or, again, that history travels with the dog now. Mm-hmm. And then the humans working with that dog are responsible for that history. That liability impacts humane societies and shelters across the state. The scramble to get ready for March 20th this year for a place like mine was real. We put well over 100 hours of staff time training, making sure that all of our contracts were in order. And, it's kind of boring to say, contracts, but, right now there's a little bit of a struggle amongst humane societies dog rescues, transfer partners over whose agreement is the agreement you should use. Do we need to have an agreement that we have for somebody transferring animals to us? Do they need to have an agreement to us? There's probably going to have to be some kind of common agreement that's hammered out, but that doesn't exist right now. So it's battle of the contracts.
Interesting. Scott sent us this email. Scott says he has a neighbor who decided to try and rehab a previously abused dogs. There are many kids and dogs in the area. Scott says a neighbor has been bit by this dog, and the dog that was attacked had later died. No reports have been made to his knowledge. He says they now walk the dog with a muzzle, but when it sees our dog out walking, it always gets aggressive. What are the responsibilities of this owner at this point? Larry or Jen, either of you want to weigh in on that question? The response.
I mean,
You want to go
dog-
first, Larry?
well, yeah, I'll go first if you don't mind.
Yeah,
No,
please.
no, go for it.
So from a dog warden's perspective, and from what I've done what we've done in the past, yes, he would be liable. He could be liable, I should say. Would be liable. He could be, and he's going to have to comply with all the laws. Whether you're owning, keeping, or harboring the dog, you have to comply with all the dog laws. And there is a Supreme Court ruling now. Since this Avery's Law went into effect, obviously there's going to be more case laws as we go along. Some people are going to take cases all the way to the Supreme Court. That's just a given. That's how it works. So until we get that, we have to go off of what we currently already have. And there's a Supreme Court ruling that says if the owner, harbor, or keeper knows the past history of the dog, they are responsible for complying with, even if it has never been designated as such, they are still can be held accountable for that as a dangerous dog moving forward. So what I'm saying is if that gentleman or female knew that dog was caused injury before unprovoked, they know the history of the dog. If it does it again, they can be held accountable as a dangerous dog, even though that dog has not been designated as a dangerous dog yet.
I
Again,
totally
this
agree.
is all case law, Supreme Court rulings. So going forward, that could change, but that's just how the system works when criminal charges apply. Until another case law comes out or a Supreme Court ruling comes out, you have to go about what's on the books right now.
Yeah, Jen, thoughts on following up to that?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. If that person pulled in a dog and they knew that dog had a behavioral history of aggression or bites, they should have been managing that dog's environment immediately. The use of a muzzle is great, but the fact that the dog had already acted out in a vicious manner, that puts the responsibility on the owner, which I do like about Avery's Law. I really do like that they are expecting responsible ownership, because that is the best prevention in this. But that person hopefully is also using behavioral modification, like professional training, if they are still going to harbor that dog, but they absolutely should be liable for those injuries.
Yeah, and Jen, staying with you, Ken brought up a moment ago the kind of the battle of the contracts and what's happening to employees. Can you talk about how Avery's Law is going to impact the folks that are working with you, the added responsibility? Is it going to have a chilling effect on folks thinking that they might be held more accountable for if they're out walking a dog? How's that impacted the work you're doing?
So we had an emergency board meeting and changed a lot of our contractual language. So if we do take in an owner surrender, they have to follow a contract that very clearly shows that the dog has never had a bite history, the dog has never shown any type of aggression towards humans, children, like adults, children, other animals. And if they do not provide a true record and that dog shows to have other, like the behavioral issues start to show up, we have the right to return the dog back and or deal with the dog behaviorally if they are not safe to be returned back to the owner. So we are definitely changing the way we take in dogs. So owner surrenders, we're very strict on what dogs we will accept in, and that goes the same for shelters. We require more testing videos before we will take them in, and the testing videos require the dog being tested with multiple people, the dog being tested with multiple sized dogs, male and female, and also cat testing. So we need to see that the dog can, at the very least, in that chaotic environment of a shelter, be around others peacefully without trying to attack. So it definitely, it also started us engaging in assessments by trainers much faster. If a dog growls about something, we start looking into that immediately. And we've also asked our fosters to provide behavioral details, almost like a diary, throughout their fostering stay. So we can prove and or show this dog has been in these circumstances and this is how they have acted throughout. So we are absolutely trying to provide more details. So when the dog is placed, we are confident in that placement.
Thanks for that, Jen. Let's go back to the phones. Beatrice is calling in from Cleveland. Beatrice, what's your thought today?
Hi, thanks for taking my call. It's a very serious subject. Dogs, all dogs, even small dogs, are descendants of wolves. They have canine teeth for a reason. They're predators and meat eaters. And they will form into packs automatically. And if they have no food, they will eat people. Now, a lot of people are using dogs, especially pit bulls, as cheap home security. And in fact, I read that most of the shelters now, the majority of the dog populations in the shelters are either pit bulls or pit bull mix. If they ever get loose, watch out. They will form packs. And now, a lot of people, they do this. They don't treat they want them to be vicious. That's home security. And when they move or something comes up, they just let them loose, at least in my neighborhood. People are also training these dogs to fight and gamble. We have a real big gambling problem, and that's one of the manifestations of that illness. And I read, not 2 years ago, a woman was mauled to death by a pack of chihuahuas.
Thanks for the call, Beatrice. Larry, I want to go back to you and ask you a question that we got via email from John. And he says, when I was 7, I was petting a neighbor's dog and was severely bitten, nearly losing my eye. In retrospect, it was an extremely hot day. The dog didn't know me, and I had leaned over to give it a kiss. And he says, provoked or not? And that's kind of a real-world example that I wonder if we can ask you about.
Yeah, I mean, without investigating the whole incident, but from what you've told me, I would say that it was not provoked. But again, I didn't investigate it. I don't know if there's any more to it than that. But if you're just petting a dog and you have the right to be there, they've either invited you in the house, or you have the right to be in that area with the dog. I would say that was an unprovoked. But again, don't know all the details. But from what you've just told me, I would say that's unprovoked.
Yeah. Jen, I want to ask you about kids and dogs, and obviously Avery's Law, named after a young girl that was attacked. What should people know about paying attention to dogs and children that are playing? What kind of education does your organization do in that regard?
So if a child is in the home of the adopter, like if the applicant has a child, we have protocols where during the meet and greets, specifically, we have our fosters watch how that child attempts to engage with the dog. That will show us how, and also how the parents are with that. So if the parents walk away while the child's engaging with the dog, we already know there's not going to be a lot of monitoring of that situation. And we really try to avoid that. Children don't think of consequence the same as dogs. So children also move quickly. They can fall on a dog. They can try to take something from a dog. And if the owners are not being responsible with the behaviors between a child and a dog, it sets everyone up to fail. Dogs can react quickly, and if they have reactivity that hasn't been addressed, a child can be severely injured, and that is everything we are trying to avoid. We've always kind of safeguarded with that because we don't want children, or anyone, but the children specifically in this matter, to be in a circumstance like that.
Thanks for that, Jen. We have about 2 minutes left on this topic. A couple of folks have asked about pit bulls, and when we get to that topic, Jeff is calling in from Strongsville. What's your thought today, Jeff?
Well, I was wondering if the law was going to separate the breeds out of the term pit bull. I mean, like the gentleman who called earlier, pit bull is, that classification that becomes the boogeyman. his poor beagle was attacked and killed. He was attacked by an Australian sheepdog or herder. Yet the entire conversation was, well, we got to watch out for pit bulls. The pit bull wasn't the one that attacked him. Pit bulls are many breeds, as I'm sure your experts know. And we pull them off. I've had nothing but pit bulls, and yeah, they're used for fighting. You're right. They're used because they're cool to be aggressive for these guys. And are we going after these people that train dogs? These were nanny dogs. They were meant to take care of kids. They were trained to be vicious. They weren't born one day and decide, you know what, we're going to be every breed to be the most vicious.
Yeah.
They're trained.
Ken, before we wrap today, comment on pit bulls, any separation in the law, or the potential for any kind of dog breed to be vicious, really.
Well, any dog can be vicious. When it comes to pit bulls, there are places in Ohio that the municipalities have banned those dogs. And so when a place like Rescue Village has a pit bull that is up for adoption, there's only so many places that people can come from to adopt that dog, for that dog to then to go legally into the community. So, and this has been loosening over time as opposed to getting more strict. So it's interesting that people are concerned about pit bulls, and they can be concerning, but I would say that any 60-pound dog or any tiny dog can actually be dangerous to its owners or its neighbors. So pit bulls just have a bigger mouth and a stronger jaw set, so they're going to obviously do more damage. But they're not any more necessarily likely to hurt you with the proper training. And also, if you do have a dog that is deemed vicious or something like that, then the animal is dealt with properly.
Gotcha. That is Ken Clark, Executive Director of Rescue Village Animal Shelter and a Geauga County Humane Officer. Ken, thanks so much for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Also, we had Jen Book, the president of Cause for Canines Rescue Group based out of Columbus. Jen, thanks for calling in.
Thanks for having me.
And Larry Williams, who is the Chief Dog Warden in Licking County and Southwest Director of the Ohio County Dog Wardens Association. Larry, thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.